Hi everyone, welcome to the K2 live stream from Camp 4.
There are mountains that test skill, and there are mountains that test judgment. K2 tests something quieter. It asks how much attention a human can afford to lose before the mountain takes the rest. In the summer of 2025, a small red light blinked to life high above the Karakoram. It was not a rescue beacon. It was not a distress signal. It was a live broadcast. From a ledge of ice near the upper camps, a man named Ethan Cole spoke calmly into a helmet-mounted camera. His voice carried no panic, only focus, only intent. He told the unseen audience that the weather felt manageable, that the wind had eased, that the summit ridge was closer than it looked. Below him, the mountain dropped away into blue shadow. Above him, K2 waited without expression. Millions would later claim they knew exactly when the climb turned fatal. They would point to the storm, the slip, the silence. But those who have lived long enough around high places know better. Mountains do not decide suddenly. They keep accounts. Ethan was not a professional alpinist. He was not reckless in the way people imagine. He trained, he prepared, he listened selectively. What set him apart was not courage or ambition. It was attention divided. One eye on the ice, one eye on the world watching. At base camp, veteran climbers had already noticed it. The pauses to adjust equipment that didn't keep him alive. The moments spent talking when silence conserved breath. Small things. On K2, small things accumulate. This is not a story about technology, and it is not a story about fame. Those are distractions too. This is a story about timing, restraint, and the thin margin between control and collapse. If you're new here, this is K2 Stories. We tell these stories slowly, without spectacle, because the mountain never rushes and, neither should understanding. High above, the red light was still blinking. For now, Ethan Cole arrived at K2 base camp in late June, when the glacier still looked deceptively stable and the mountain allowed newcomers to believe in progress. His tent stood slightly apart from the larger commercial teams, close enough to hear the radio chatter, far enough to feel independent. Independence mattered to him. He had crossed continents chasing it. He was 41 years old, former systems analyst, divorced, no children. The kind of man who had learned to replace routine with risk after routine stopped answering his questions. He had climbed before Denali by the West Buttress, Aconcagua, in a good season, a winter ascent of Mount Hood that went mostly unnoticed. None of it was extraordinary. None of it was supposed to be. But this climb was different. Ethan wasn't here to add another summit to a resume. He was here to document presence, to prove, as he put it, in a quiet recording made days before the climb, that attention is a form of respect. The irony went unnoticed. The team he loosely attached himself to consisted of 5 climbers who shared ropes and camps, but planned to move independently above Camp 3. Among them was Irina Volkova, a Russian alpinist with 2 K2 summits behind her and a reputation for conservative decisions. She watched Ethan assemble his camera rig on the moraine with open skepticism. "You'll stop filming above the bottleneck," she said, not as a question. Ethan smiled. He always smiled when challenged. "If I can still talk, I can still think." Irina did not argue. Experience had taught her that persuasion wastes oxygen. The climb began smoothly. Camp 1 came and went under clear skies. Camp 2 followed, wrapped in drifting cloud and constant wind. Ethan's broadcasts gained traction quickly. Viewers commented on the frost forming in his beard, the sound of crampons biting into old ice, the way his voice remained measured even as the air thinned. He did not exaggerate. That made it convincing. What the audience could not feel was time. How long it took to stop, to speak, to adjust the camera so the angle felt honest. Above 6,500 meters, second stretch. Decisions slow. The mountain noticed. By the time they reached Camp 3, forecasts had narrowed to a fragile window, less than 48 hours before a system moved in from the west. Irina wanted an early push and an earlier retreat. Ethan agreed. On camera, off camera, he lingered. On K2, lingering is not rest. It is negotiation, and the mountain never bargains. They left Camp 3 before dawn, the sky clear in the way that makes climbers suspicious rather than hopeful. Stars hung low and sharp, as if the cold had pulled them closer. Ethan's camera light flicked on as he stepped into the line of headlamps, moving upward, a thin procession toward the bottleneck. The bottleneck is not feared because it is steep. It is feared because it waits. A narrow traverse beneath a suspended wall of ice. It offers no protection and no margin. You pass through when conditions allow it, or you do not pass at all. Irina moved first, setting a steady pace, her focus fixed on efficiency. Ethan followed, breathing hard but controlled, narrating less now, choosing words carefully. By mid-morning, the wind began to rise. Not violent yet, just enough to steal warmth from exposed skin. The serac above them cracked once loud. Distant, the sound traveled through the ice, not the air. Everyone froze. Irina looked back. "That's your warning," she said over the radio. Ethan nodded, the camera catching only the movement. "Still within the window," he replied. He was speaking as much to the audience as to the team. Perhaps more. Above the bottleneck, the slope eased slightly, but the damage was already done. Oxygen was thinning faster than expected. Ethan stopped more often now. Not to re-stressed invites doubt but to speak. To frame the moment. Each pause cost seconds. Each second cost clarity. Viewers later remarked on how calm he seemed. They mistook control for safety. On K2, composure can be a symptom. Around 7,900 meters, Irina made the call. She would turn back within the hour if the wind increased. She told Ethan directly. He acknowledged her, again, on camera, again calmly. But he did not mirror her urgency. He was counting something else. Distance, attention, momentum. The summit ridge lay ahead, thin and exposed, its ice hardened by decades of wind. The mountain offered no shelter, only choices. Ethan adjusted his mask, fingers stiff, breath loud in his ears. The red light blinked steadily. A small thing, but small things, by now had begun to stack. When the clouds rose from below, they did not announce themselves. They simply arrived. The change came in increments, not in drama. Visibility shortened first. The horizon dissolved into white layers that erased depth and distance. Then the wind sharpened, carrying ice crystals that found every gap in clothing and thought. Ethan's breathing grew louder, not panicked, just inefficient. His camera feed flickered as the signals struggled against the weather and the terrain. Irina stopped and turned. "This is it," she said into the radio. "We go down." Behind her, the rest of the team hesitated only long enough to secure their descent. Decisions on K2 are rarely unanimous, but they must be timely. Ethan stood a few meters higher, the summit ridge just visible through breaks in the cloud, close enough to justify risk, far enough to demand more. "I'm almost there," he said, his voice measured, deliberate. The camera caught his eyes focused, distant. "I'll be quick." There is no quick above 8,000 meters. Irina did not argue. She had learned what argument costs at altitude. "There is no almost here," she replied. "Only up or down." Ethan did not answer. He stepped forward. Minutes passed, then more. The wind strengthened, pressing against him like a physical force. At one point his footing failed. The camera jolted, the image spinning wildly before stabilizing. He was hanging from the rope, breathing hard, voice low. "Slip," he said. "I'm okay." Viewers flooded the stream with warnings, pleas, instructions. None of it reached him in time to matter. Attention, once divided, cannot be recalled on command. By the time he reached the summit marker, a thin pole, barely visible through the storm as movements, had slowed to something deliberate and fragile. He touched it briefly. No celebration, no raised arms, just contact. Confirmation. What happened next was not captured live. When the feed cut, many assumed the worst immediately. Others insisted it was a technical failure. Down on the mountain, Irina heard one last transmission through static, a fragment, something about anchors failing. Then nothing. The storm closed in fully, sealing the upper ridge. Wind speeds climbed beyond safe limits. Rescue was impossible. On K2, impossibility is not emotional, it is factual. For 14 hours, the last frame of Ethan's broadcast remained frozen online, a gloved hand extended into white space. Above, the mountain continued doing what it always does, nothing at all. The storm lifted the following morning, not gently, but with indifference. It left the upper mountain stripped and silent, as if nothing unusual had occurred. That silence is what unsettles experienced climbers most. Noise suggests struggle. Silence suggests finality. Irina waited longer than she should have before moving upward again, not because she believed Ethan was alive, but because certainty requires confirmation. She climbed with Mateo Rios, a Chilean guide, and 2 high-altitude porters, Tenzin and Karma, all of them moving slowly, methodically, eyes scanning for anything out of place in a landscape already crowded with reminders of failure. They found Ethan's helmet first, lodged against a fixed line just above the bottleneck. The camera mount was cracked. The red live sticker, half torn away, fluttered weakly in the wind. No one spoke. They did not need to. Farther up, partially buried against a rib of ice, they found him. Ethan was still clipped to the rope, one hand extended outward, fingers curled as if reaching for balance that never came. His goggles were opaque with frost. His oxygen mask hung loose, empty. There was no sign of struggle in his face, only exhaustion, preserved. The summit lay less than 200 meters above. They did not move him. On K2, bodies are not recovered unless conditions make it trivial, and nothing on this mountain is trivial. They built a small windbreak of snow and stone, an act less of burial than acknowledgement. As they prepared to descend, Mateo noticed something intact beneath Ethan's jacket. A secondary camera chest-mounted, its casing cracked but sealed. Irina hesitated, then nodded. "Take it," she said. "If it still works, it matters." Back at base camp, 2 days later, the device was thawed carefully, almost ceremonially. The file was there, a few minutes long, recorded after the live stream ended. Ethan's voice was weaker than before, but clear. He spoke without performance, without audience. He acknowledged the summit, he acknowledged his condition, and then he said something unexpected, not about achievement, not about risk, but about misunderstanding himself, about mistaking attention for meaning. When the video ended, no one in the tent moved. Outside, the mountain stood unchanged. Inside, something had shifted. The story was no longer about a live broadcast or a fatal choice. It was about a man who reached exactly what he had aimed for, undiscovered, too late, that the aim itself had been flawed. In the weeks that followed, the world argued the way it always does when distance makes judgment easy. Some called Ethan Cole a cautionary tale. Others called him a pioneer. Most reduced his final climb to a headline short enough to scroll past. The mountain remained uninterested in all of it. What mattered never fit cleanly into debate. Ethan did not die because of a storm. Storms are common on K2. He did not die because of technology, or ambition, or arrogance in isolation. He died because attention is finite, and the mountain demands all of it. K2 does not punish dreams. It punishes delay. It punishes negotiation. It punishes the quiet moment when a climber chooses to explain instead of act. Those who survive high places learn a difficult humility. They learn that judgment degrades before strength does. That clarity fades long before courage. And that the most dangerous voice on the mountain is often the one inside your own head, calmly explaining why just a little more is acceptable. Ethan reached the summit. That fact is now uncontested. It is also, in the end, irrelevant. What remains is the lesson climb carved into the ice for those willing to see it. Presence cannot be shared. Awareness cannot be outsourced. And meaning cannot be transmitted through a signal, no matter how strong. On K2, the mountain does not care who is watching. It cares only whether you are. This is why experienced climbers turn around within sight of success, not because they lack desire, but because they understand priority. The summit is a location. Survival is a decision. On K2, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. This has been K2 Stories. We'll be here when you're ready to listen again.